Have you ever pondered how a war lasting only 6 days could alter the course of history? It's a question that takes us back to the spring of 1967, as tensions simmered in the Middle East, setting the stage for what would come to be known as the Six-Day War. At the heart of the conflict, we find the Straits of Tiran, a narrow sea passage, and Israel's only access to the Red Sea. In an act of aggression, Egypt's president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, closed the straits, effectively imposing a maritime blockade on Israel. This provocative move was more than a mere inconvenience. It was a direct blow to Israel's economy and a violation of international law. But the closure of the Straits of Tiran was just the beginning. Nasser took things a step further by expelling the United Nations Emergency Force from Sinai. This peacekeeping force had been stationed there since the Suez Crisis of 1956, serving as a buffer between Egypt and Israel. Their expulsion left Israel exposed and vulnerable. In the background, alliances were being formed. Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, three of the most powerful Arab nations, joined forces against Israel. These alliances were not just military in nature. They were a show of unity, a signal to the world that the Arab nations were standing together against what they perceived as Israeli aggression. These were the sparks that ignited the flame of conflict. The closure of the Straits of Tiran, the expulsion of UN peacekeeping forces, and the formation of Arab alliances against Israel. Each of these events played a crucial role in escalating tensions in the region. They were the precursors to a war that would last only 6 days, but whose impact would be felt for decades to come. So here we are, on the brink of a defining moment in history, poised on the precipice of a war that would reshape the Middle East. These tensions set the stage for a conflict that would forever change the Middle East. Imagine waking up one morning to find your country under surprise attack. On the early morning of June 5, 1967, Israel initiated a preemptive strike that would alter the course of history. The Israeli Air Force, in a daring and meticulously planned operation, decimated the majority of the Egyptian air fleet while they were still on the ground. The rationale behind Israel's decision to strike first was rooted in a potent mixture of fear and survival instinct. Israel, feeling cornered by the growing military might of its Arab neighbors and their increasing hostility, saw this as the only viable strategy to ensure its survival. It was a high-stakes gamble, but one that paid off beyond their wildest expectations. The surprise attack left the Egyptian Air Force in ruins and gave Israel a distinct advantage in the conflict. By the end of the first day, the balance of power had dramatically shifted. What would you do if you saw your enemy's defenses crumbling before your very eyes? The second day of the Six-Day War saw Israel, a young nation, seize the moment. With their initial surprise attack on Egypt's airfield still echoing in the region, they pushed forward, their tanks rumbling across the Sinai Peninsula. Their goal was simple: to dismantle Egypt's defenses and gain control of the strategically important area. Each day brought new victories. Israeli forces, driven by a potent mix of determination and desperation, advanced steadily, overcoming resistance and capturing key positions. The Sinai, a vast desert region, was slowly but surely falling into Israel's hands. But it wasn't just Egypt feeling the heat. Jordan too was drawn into the maelstrom. Despite initial hesitations, Israel opened a new front against Jordan on the second day. The fighting was fierce, with both sides vying for control of Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. As the dust settled on the fourth day, Israel had not only held its ground but also captured significant territories. The Gaza Strip, a small but densely populated region along the Mediterranean coast, had been wrested from Egyptian control. The West Bank, then under Jordanian rule, was also captured, including the whole of the old city of Jerusalem. These territories, home to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, were now under Israeli control. The victories were not without cost. Lives were lost, and the landscape was scarred by the brutal realities of war. Yet these territorial gains would have a profound impact on Israel's standing in the region. They served not only to expand the nation's borders, but also to shift the balance of power in the Middle East. The map was being redrawn, and Israel was the one holding the pen. The tide was turning, and the momentum was firmly with Israel. Their audacious plan, born of necessity and executed with precision, was paying off. In a matter of days, Israel had gained significant ground. What if, in the final days of battle, you had to make a decision that could risk international condemnation? These were the stakes Israel faced on days 5 and 6 of the Six-Day War. With the sands of time running against them, they made a daring move that would forever change the face of the Middle East. The Israeli government decided to strike Syria and capture the Golan Heights. This was not an easy decision. They knew it could draw the ire of the international community, but they also understood the strategic importance of the Golan Heights. This elevated plateau provided an unrivaled vantage point overlooking Israel's most fertile land, and for years it had been used by Syria to shell Israeli villages and farms below. The Israelis decided that the security of their people was paramount, and so they took the risk. The battle was fierce. Israeli forces fought against entrenched Syrian troops who had the advantage of higher ground, but the Israelis were tenacious, using their superior air power and the element of surprise to their advantage. After 2 days of intense fighting, the Golan Heights was in Israeli hands. The international response was immediate and harsh. The United Nations Security Council called for a ceasefire, condemning Israel's actions. But for Israel, the capture of the Golan Heights was a strategic necessity, not a political maneuver. It was about protecting their citizens and securing their borders. They had made a tough decision, and they were prepared to face the consequences. The capture of the Golan Heights marked a turning point in the Six-Day War. It demonstrated Israel's resolve to protect its people and its willingness to make tough decisions in the face of international pressure. It was a bold move, one that would have lasting implications for the Middle East and the world. By the end of the 6 days, Israel had successfully captured territories from all its neighboring foes. And while the world may have condemned their actions, for Israel it was a matter of survival. The Golan Heights, a once contentious battleground, now served as a strategic stronghold, a testament to a nation's will to protect its people and its land. How would you navigate the aftermath of a war that has drastically altered your country's borders? This is a question that the nations of the Middle East grappled with following the Six-Day War. The war, a swift and decisive conflict that spanned a mere 6 days, led to significant political and territorial changes. Israel, triumphant, found itself in control of vast new territories. These included the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip, wrested from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, taken from Jordan, and the Golan Heights, claimed from Syria. These territorial gains more than tripled Israel's size, a change that would reshape the political map of the region. But with new territory came new challenges. Israel found itself responsible for a large number of Palestinians living within the newly acquired borders. These people found themselves displaced, their homes now part of a country with which they had been at war. This displacement added fuel to the simmering Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a struggle for land and identity that persists to this day. The aftermath of the Six-Day War also brought about a shift in the balance of power in the Middle East. Israel emerged as a dominant regional force, its military prowess and strategic gains in the war enhancing its standing. Its neighbors, on the other hand, had to contend with the loss of territory and the blow to their national pride. Yet, the war and its aftermath also set the stage for further conflict and negotiation. The territories gained by Israel became points of contention, hotspots in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian struggle. They also became bargaining chips in peace negotiations, as seen when Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt as part of the Camp David Accords in 1978. The Six-Day War, a rapid and decisive conflict, left a lasting imprint on the Middle East. It reshaped borders, displaced people, and altered the political landscape. It was a war that, in just 6 days, changed the course of history for the nations involved, and its effects are still felt today. So what does this all mean for us today? As we reflect on the 6-Day War, we reminisce its defining moments. The precursors to the conflict that were like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. Then came the surprise attack, a wake-up call to the world as the war took an unexpected turn. We remember the turning of the tides, days 2 to 4, where the balance of power shifted dramatically. The capture of the Golan Heights on the final days, an audacious move that marked a significant victory. And then, the aftermath that followed, a time of reckoning, of diplomacy and negotiations. Each of these moments played a crucial role in shaping the course of history. They've etched a permanent mark on the annals of time, leaving us lessons that resonate even today. The 6-Day War, while short, forever changed the landscape of the Middle East and continues to shape world politics today.